The Land Rover TD5 starter motor exchange. It's the top bolt. We've all Googled it and we've all discovered it's a complete nightmare. So I thought I'd give it a go. A job that should take 45 minutes, an hour, maybe it'll take 2 hours. But then again, that's what Land Rovers are all about. And remember, don't walk towards your Land Rover with a spanner in your hand. It will sense it and all the bolts will start rounding off and snapping. You'll hear it happening as you walk towards it with a spanner, so keep those spanners out of view. Anyway, let's get to it. The top bolt wasn't as bad as I thought. I was pleasantly surprised. So it's also worth just taking a quick look at the item before we put it on. So here is the infamous top hole. That sits on a stud. So this is where the bolt is that's the difficult one to remove. And you can see as it's sitting here as it lies on the vehicle. So once you've put the socket on from underneath with the extension, it comes out to about here. And you can see just exactly the relationship to it. You will be able to come up and find your way through and use this as a guide, and you know you've got your hand on the correct bolt. So now how do we get our hands in there to get it done? Well, my left hand here can work between this side of the chassis rail and the prop shaft here. So I can get my hand up there behind it and guide where I'm putting my socket assembly. The right hand is going to come from this side of the prop shaft. I'm lying under the vehicle, under ramps of course. So I can just practice those sit-ups. You'll just be able to raise yourself ever so slightly and get in there and get the socket assembly on. So what is the socket assembly? We've got a 15mm socket on here and about a 5-inch extension. And that's where your right hand is going to feed that through and your left hand is going to place it in place. Is you're going to add this. This is obviously a converter, but it's also got the hole to use an extension. By adding that onto the end, what you've done is you've managed give yourself enough distance so that you can protrude past the back of the starter motor here, and you can put a nice great big extension bar in there. And if you just time it right and just rotate this correctly and get it all in the right place at the right time, you've got enough room there to just give a bit of force on this, and that will crack the nut. Once you've done that, you may want to put a universal joint on there, and by doing that you can add another small extension, and you can then just use your ratchet to get it off in the normal sort of a way. And after you've done that, just do it with your fingers. Looking underneath now, you can see that I've already undone this. I've disconnected the cable from the ignition signal, and I've just tucked that all out of the way. 13mm, 13mm. This is also 13mm. The one that you need at the top bolt is a 15mm. Well, it certainly was on my disco. Bolt on mine was a complete bugger because your standard sort of socket head or your ratchet driver will not operate very well because of this built up area here on the starter. And of course the starter length means that I need an extension of a decent size. But once I get an extension of a decent size, I'm working in this area here and I'm finding that the back end of the prop shaft or the front end of the prop shaft and the housing, I can't use it. So here's the magic key. Spanners are often a bit tricky to do that. Get our 13mm socket, get our little extension piece on there as well, and again get my extension bar. And again, you can just turn that enough that you can crack the nut. So once it's out, you can see how it works. You've got the top bolt up here, the top stud, and it all hangs on a stud. So once you've undone those 13mm, which are here and here, of course, holding the starter on, once you've undone those 13mm bolts, you'll find it slides off nicely. So all I'm going to do now then is crawl out from underneath the vehicle. I'm going to get some rags and things, clean up the mating faces, clean up the bolts and the studs, and make sure I can get everything back in. And I'm going to probably stick some brake cleaner up there and just get rid of all that oil and crap. Quick general inspection to make sure everything is well before it all goes away. We don't want to have to do that again. well, the moment of truth. There we have it. No hesitation. She's always started well when the starter motor's okay. Let's go for a test drive. So I was pleasantly surprised. That top bolt wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Yes, it took me a while because typically I look at the YouTube videos, I look at Rave, I have a bit of a practice run just to see what bolts go where, then I make a cup of tea, then I think about starting, then I have another cup of tea, and then I crack on with the job. But actually, it wasn't as bad as it seems. I've seen recommendations to go in from the top. I had a look at that. It's too difficult with some of the stuff that's in there on certainly the Disco TD5. I don't have little leprechaun fingers, so I just can't get in there. I went from underneath, put the vehicle up on ramps, as you saw in the video, and using extension bar about 5 inches with the little converter that's got the hole for the big extension bars to go through. I was able to get enough torque on there to crack the nut, and then you can get in there with your other tools. I found the difficulty being so tight you couldn't get in there with some of the torque that was needed to get the job done. One of the bolts, the 13mm bolts, it was quite tricky for me using the tools that I had to hand. I was using a larger socket set, so even though 13mm is quite small for that socket set, it was a larger socket set, so it's a bit chunkier and it wouldn't work by the starter. So I used the same sort of technique again, used that little 3/4 to 5/8 converter, or whatever it is called, with the hole in it for the extension bar, because again it was just a place I could put a bar in and just put some force on without having the head of the ratchet giving extra distance and causing difficulties. In retrospect, it would have been a lot easier if I'd gone for the smaller socket set. But hey, I was under the car, it was dirty, I was tired. I thought I would just use what I had. That's what we do a lot on Land Rovers, isn't it?